On February 15, 1997, 4-year-old Angelique Emily James went missing from her family's home in Los Angeles, California. Although Angelique was so little at the time she went missing, it initially seemed like it would be easy enough to find her because of her unique physical appearance. Angelique was born on October 2, 1992, with a congenital skeletal abnormality that resulted in one leg and one arm being shorter than the other. At the time of her disappearance, Angelique weighed 40 pounds at 3 feet 6 inches, with black hair and brown eyes. She also had burn scars on one foot and a fracture in her left arm from an earlier incident that was only detectable through an X-ray. The last time family members saw Angelique was on February 15, 1997. She was at home with her mother, Shirley Ann James. However, when police began investigating Angelique's disappearance, Shirley was not very willing to help with the investigation, which immediately raised red flags. Shirley had 8 children, one of whom was a 9-month-old daughter who had died in 1992, supposedly from sudden infant death syndrome, SIDS. It seemed logical to expect her to be eager to do anything possible to find her daughter, but that wasn't the case. Meanwhile, the circumstances of the disappearance made police classify Angelique's case as endangered missing. The likelihood of a 4-year-old disappearing from home in the presence of family members was just very low. As the investigation progressed, evidence led police to believe that Angelique may have been killed sometime between December 15, 1996 and March 1, 1997. So, she might have gone missing long before police were even notified of the disappearance. Eventually, in November 1997, 9 months after Angelique's disappearance, police were ready to make an arrest. The prime suspect in Angelique's disappearance was her mother, Shirley, who had for months failed to answer questions about her daughter's whereabouts. It didn't help that by this time, child protection workers had taken 3 of Shirley's children from her custody. Shirley was charged with Angelique's presumed murder, as well as 2 counts of child abuse and 1 count of corporal inquiry to a child. Investigators also looked into the 1992 death of Shirley's 9-month-old daughter, seemingly to find any connections between that death and Angelique's disappearance. However, the aspect of the investigation did not yield any results, and no charges were filed. In January 1998, Shirley pleaded not guilty to all the charges, but later pleaded no contest to involuntary manslaughter in Angelique's presumed death. Under this plea deal, her sentence got to a maximum of 5 years in prison for her daughter's murder. Unfortunately, investigators could never find Angelique's remains despite extensive searches in the family home's backyard and neighborhood, even after a cadaver dog initially traced her scent in the area. This leaves the mystery of her disappearance unsolved. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department is still leading the investigation into Angelique's disappearance, although the case has long gone cold. However, police still believe that there was foul play involved in Angelique's disappearance and that she was the victim of something sinister and terrifying. It was Monday afternoon on February 2, 1987, when Maria Pachenko took her 2-week-old baby boy, Elias Jr. Monroy, to the LAUSC Medical Center in the 2000 block of Marengo Street for a routine checkup. Elias, who weighed 9 pounds and was 20 inches long at 2 weeks old, was born healthy and strong, although the delivery had been difficult on Maria. She was still recovering from the cesarean section, and the pain made walking and moving around difficult. While in the waiting room at the pediatric clinic, a woman approached Maria and sat next to her. This woman, who claimed she was also a mother, seemed friendly and warm, and she quickly struck up a conversation with Maria. As the two were talking, Elias started to cry, so Maria dug into her diaper bag for a bottle. However, Maria soon realized she didn't bring enough bottles, and she would have to get more formula. Her new friend quickly offered to hold Elias while she ran the errand. Maria, believing that she was just another mom waiting to see her doctor, trusted her baby with this complete stranger, whom she later described as a very well-groomed young lady. Maria was gone for only 4 minutes. By the time she returned, the woman was gone, and so was Elias. Nobody saw the woman leaving or knew the direction she went. Initially, Maria believed it had been the woman's turn to go for her appointment, and she had taken Elias with her for lack of a better alternative. However, no one matching the woman's description could be identified as a patient there. Slowly, it dawned on Maria that her baby had been abducted. This abduction was immediately complex because, unfortunately, Maria only knew very little about the woman. She was Hispanic, in her late 20s to early 30s, with light-colored frosted black hair. Her complexion was medium dark, with a height of about 5 foot to 5 foot 2 inches, weighing around 135 to 140 pounds. Authorities couldn't get the mystery woman's name or any other information about her. It was like she just disappeared from the surface of the earth. For Maria, it was a nightmare come true. Just 2 weeks earlier, on January 19, 1987, she had welcomed her new baby even as she had welcomed the new year. Now, he was gone without a trace. During their investigation, Los Angeles police uncovered a similar abduction case that occurred about 70 miles away from the LA USC Medical Center. On January 14th, a woman matching the description of the woman in Elias's case approached a mother in a post office in Hesperia, California, who was holding her 4-month-old son. The woman initiated a conversation with this mother and asked to hold her baby, but the mother refused. The mother eventually left the post office and went to run other errands. While doing that, she arrived at a Safeway and parked her car. As she was trying to unbuckle her son from his car seat, she noticed the woman from the post office charging at her, screaming, "I want the baby," and trying to rip the baby from his mother's arms. At this point, she noticed that the woman was with a man who was also barreling towards them. The mother started kicking and shouting for them to leave her alone until she could escape from both of them by running into the nearby store. The mother later reported to the police and provided a description of the woman and man who attacked her and tried to steal her baby. However, despite the promising lead, investigators could not locate either of them. They could not officially confirm if the two cases were related, although all evidence suggests it was the same woman in both cases. Ultimately, they couldn't find Elias or the woman who took him. Since he was abducted at just 2 weeks old, Elias's family did not have a photo of him. So the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, NCMEC, used photographs of his siblings and other family members to generate an age progression image of what 36-year-old Elias might look like to aid in the search. 36 years later, Maria is still desperately hoping to be reunited with her son with the help of these generated images. "Elias, look for me," she cries. "Communicate with me. I am your mom, and you are my dream come true that someone took from me." According to the NCMEC, infant abductions like Elias's case are not uncommon. Most times the abductions are committed by women of childbearing age, such as the unidentified woman in Elias's case, who typically try to raise the child as theirs. In many cases, abducted babies are eventually found alive as adults, having grown up with a different family, sometimes not even knowing they were kidnapped as a baby. So, much like Maria, authorities are still optimistic about the chances of finding Elias, and they encourage anyone with information that can lead to his whereabouts to come forward. Elias Monroy's disappearance remains a mystery that continues to haunt his mother, Maria, and the rest of the family. There have been almost 4 decades of unanswered questions of what ifs and what nots, but Maria remains determined to find her long-lost son. Crystal Ann Tymich was born on September 23, 1987, into the world of Jane Newman and Mario Tymich. Described by her mother Jane as beautiful, vibrant, and playful, Crystal enjoyed the simple pleasures of playing video games and spent leisurely hours at arcades close to her home. However, her childhood innocence would soon be overshadowed by a mysterious and unsettling event that would leave an indelible mark on her hearts of those who loved her. Crystal's parents, Jane and Mario, found themselves navigating the complexities of separation, leading to the custody arrangements that saw 6-year-old Crystal switching between her mother's residence in Santa Monica and her father's home in Hyde Park, Los Angeles. You see, June 30th, 1994 unfolded as just another day in the summer sun, with Crystal spending time at her father's house located at 6018 Brynhurst Avenue. But, Little did anyone know this day would mark the beginning of a perplexing and enduring mystery. On that fateful day, Crystal, accompanied by her 3 older brothers aged 8, 10, and 12, was playing around, throwing peaches over a neighbor's home. But when the call came from the children to return home, Jeffrey, one of Crystal's older brothers, noticed that Crystal was no longer with them. The last reported sighting placed her picking peaches from a neighbor's tree, but conflicting versions suggested she might have been riding her bike with her brothers. Either way, Crystal had vanished between 2 p.m. and 5 p.m. The family's response was immediate and frantic. Crystal's sudden disappearance while playing with her siblings raised an extensive search around the neighborhood. The family's intuition led them to believe that Crystal couldn't have gone far, given the close-knit nature of their play. Distraught and concerned, they scoured the surroundings, desperately seeking any sign of their beloved 6-year-old. Neighbors, while claiming no knowledge of suspicious activities, provided conflicting statements. Some saying they hadn't seen anything, while others recalled glimpses of Crystal and futile attempts to redirect her home. Describing Crystal as a 6-year-old, standing at 6 feet tall and weighing around 60 pounds with blonde hair and hazel eyes, the family's distress deepened when an hour passed without finding any trace of her. The situation warranted immediate police intervention. Law enforcement sprang into action, initiating a massive search operation that involved over 100 police officers, FBI agents, and concerned neighbors. Crystal's disappearance was swiftly labeled an abduction, and she was declared an endangered missing child. The urgency of the situation prompted the issuance of a localized tactical alert on the afternoon of June 30th, compelling all on-duty law enforcement officials to remain on shift and contribute to the search efforts. However, as dawn broke on July 1st, Crystal remained elusive, and the localized tactical alert was finally canceled at around 4:30 a.m. Soon days turned into weeks, and the search for Crystal showed no signs of yielding results. In order to encourage information that could lead to her discovery, the Los Angeles City Council offered a $10,000 reward. Despite the exhaustive efforts of searchers and the unwavering hope of Crystal's family, the case took a dark turn. When the search was officially called off, Crystal's family, left with unanswered questions, grappled with the haunting mystery of her disappearance. The year 1997 brought a glimmer of renewed awareness when a local plumbing company took it upon themselves to raise awareness by featuring Crystal's poster on their trucks. Despite this gesture, the trajectory of Crystal's case remained unchanged, leaving her family in a state of perpetual uncertainty. The next significant development in the case unfolded in 2005, more than a decade after Crystal's disappearance. Law enforcement acted on a tip regarding a suspicious burial of an animal near the home of Crystal's family occupied at the time of her vanishing. The target of the search was a neighbor's house, directly across the street from the Tymich residence. The former resident, described as a reverend who welcomed children into her home, raised suspicions. However, the exhaustive search led only to animal bones on the neighbor's property, leaving Crystal's case unresolved. Now, as 29 years have elapsed since that summer day in 1994, the search for Crystal Ann Tymich continues. A $10,000 reward remains on the table for anyone providing information that could lead to her return or apprehension of those responsible for her disappearance. Crystal's family, their determination unwavering, persist in the quest to find her alive and well. Now a woman of 35 years, the plea for information echoes through the efforts of the authorities, including the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and the Los Angeles Police Department, as they request anyone with information to come forward. You see, the passage of time has seen various initiatives to maintain awareness about Crystal's case. Reports from 1994 through 1995 provide limited insights into search efforts, and it wasn't until March of 1996, nearly 9 months after her disappearance, that a new reward of $25,000 was offered in a desperate plea for information. Tragically, the reward offer from March would later be terminated on May 5, 1996, as no information surfaced to claim the reward. Despite many attempts to reignite public interest, the case remained dormant until February 1997, when a local plumbing company took a noble stance by featuring Crystal's poster on the back of their company trucks. Such community-driven initiatives reflect the enduring impact of Crystal's story on those who feel a moral obligation to keep her memory alive. Presently, Crystal Ann Tymich would be 34 years old, her childhood frozen in time by the mysterious circumstances surrounding her disappearance. On September 20th, 1994, 31-year-old Cecilia Newball sat in the living room of the apartment she shared with her husband on Lassen Street, Chatsworth, California. Cecilia, who was 8 months pregnant, was writing thank you notes for gifts from her recent baby shower. With her due date only 2 weeks away, Cecilia and her husband, Alfredo, were eagerly expecting the arrival of their new baby. Although Cecilia wasn't going to work that morning because she was on maternity leave, Alfredo was going to work. As he got to the door, ready to leave for work, Alfredo looked at Cecilia and became so overwhelmed with her beauty and how lovely their life was together that he had to return and kiss her goodbye again. Alfredo and Cecilia met in 1991 and fell heedlessly in love with each other. After a 2-year-long courtship, the couple got married and soon began expecting their first child together. Alfredo was not Cecilia's first husband. She had earlier been married to someone else, which produced a child, a boy named Rene Perez Jr. Alfredo adored Rene and treated him like his own son. Alfredo worked as a nurse's assistant in a hospital and retirement home. While at work, he routinely called Cecilia to check on her and see if she needed anything. So, on that day, September 20th, he called her as usual, about 2.5 hours into his shift, but she did not answer the phone. He called her several more times, but she didn't pick up any of his calls, which was out of character for her. Concerned, Alfred decided to leave work earlier to check up on her. As he got to the apartment, Alfredo noticed Cecilia's car strangely parked on the street rather than inside the building's secured parking lot. This immediately raised red flags. Alfredo rushed into the apartment in search of his wife, and to his greatest horror, he didn't find either her or Rene, his stepson, even though there was no sign of a break-in or struggle. Alfredo returned to Cecilia's car and found a store-bought goodbye card on the passenger seat, alongside Cecilia's wedding and engagement rings. The card was signed simply Cecilia. It appeared Cecilia had gotten tired of the relationship and decided to leave Alfredo. But apart from leaving her car behind, there were no signs that she packed any of her or Rene's things. Besides, Alfredo believed he and Cecilia had a good relationship, a happy one. There was no logical explanation why she would suddenly abandon him 2 weeks before she was due to have their baby. Shocked beyond words, Alfredo decided to call the one person she believed would know where Cecilia was, her closest friend from work, Kevin Annabelle. When Kevin picked up the phone, Alfredo sounded oddly calm for someone whose wife had just disappeared under seemingly mysterious circumstances. But he later explained that he was so calm because he believed she would come back to him. Perhaps she needed to be away for a few days because of all of the pregnancy stress. The following day, September 21st, police contacted Alfredo to ask him about his wife's whereabouts. One of Cecilia's relatives had reached out to them after being unable to get across to Cecilia. Detective Alex Valadez of the Los Angeles Police Department was in charge of the case, which was being treated as a missing persons case. When he called Alfredo to ask about Cecilia, Detective Valadez found Alfredo's demeanor strange. Like with Kevin, Alfredo did not sound panicked or worried for someone whose pregnant wife and stepson were probably dead, as far as anyone knew. The circumstances surrounding Cecilia's disappearance seemed even more sinister when investigators found that 6 months before she disappeared, Cecilia received an odd phone call from a still unidentified woman who may have been the third party. Cecilia told her friend Camilla Comey about it, saying the unidentified woman told her she had evidence of Alfredo kissing another woman at a baby shower, which implied that Alfredo was having an affair. The woman told Cecilia she would phone again to arrange a meetup where she would give Cecilia all the evidence she had, but the call never came. About a week before she went missing, Cecilia received another call from a woman who claimed to work with Alfredo, claiming they were planning a surprise baby shower for Alfredo at work and asking Cecilia if she needed any baby furniture. 4 days after Cecilia disappeared, on September 24th, suspicion around Alfredo's behavior deepened when he received a package postmarked from Van Nuys, California. Inside the envelope was a typewritten letter from Cecilia, saying she had fallen in love with a doctor named Arturo 9 months earlier and had left with him for Honduras. She also said it was likely Arturo was the real father of her child. The envelope also contained a card identical to the one Alfredo found in Cecilia's car on the day she disappeared. Alfredo initially believed, as the letter indicated, that Cecilia had left him for another man. But then he read the letter several times over, and the more he did, the more he noticed that some parts of the letter didn't sound like Cecilia. When Cecilia's friend Kevin also read the letter, he admitted it was out of character. After Detective Valadez inspected the letter and spoke with family and friends, he concluded it wasn't from Cecilia, as it contained more information about Alfredo's family than Cecilia's. He suspected the involvement of a third party, who might have been the same mysterious woman who called Cecilia 6 months and 1 week before she disappeared. Interestingly, Cecilia disappeared the day she was supposed to meet the woman who had called about the baby's secret baby shower at Alfredo's work. But the baby shower was never held and was never even planned. Despite all their best efforts, Cecilia and her son Rene were never found. However, Detective Valadez believes the events leading up to Cecilia's disappearance were not coincidental. Instead, they were deliberate attempts by someone or some people to lure Cecilia into a trap. He also believes Alfredo's behavior was suspicious and that he might have known more about Cecilia and Rene's disappearance. Denise Diane Pflum was born on January 14, 1968, to David and Judith Pflum in Connersville, Fayette County, Indiana. In 1986, Denise was 18 years old, a senior at Connersville High School. She had brown hair, dark eyes, and a fair complexion. Denise was an exceptionally brilliant student with excellent grades and had already gained admission to Miami University in Oxford, Ohio, to study microbiology on a full scholarship. She was also a gifted athlete on the high school basketball and track team. On March 28, 1986, when Denise was on spring break, she attended an outdoor party on a local farmland near her home in Everton, Indiana. The following day, Denise realized she left her purse at the party, so she called some friends to see if anyone could go with her to find it. Unfortunately, none of her friends were available, so she went alone. Around 12:30 p.m. on March 29th, Denise left home in her 1981 Buick Regal to retrieve her purse. That was the last time her parents saw her. The same day, a farm worker claimed to have seen Denise's car parked in a field in Glenwood, Indiana, about 3 miles from where the party was held the previous day. However, the farmer did not mind it, assuming it belonged to someone local who was mushroom hunting. However, when the car remained there till the following day, March 30th, the farmer reported it to the Fayette County Sheriff's Department, where the car was quickly connected to the missing persons report Denise's parents filed the previous day. Investigators found the car locked without signs of a struggle in or around it. It seemed like Denise had driven to this desolate spot, parked her car, got out, and vanished. They immediately launched a large-scale search with a large search party comprising over 100 police officers and firefighters, searchers on foot, horseback, and in a plane. They scoured the 100-acre plot of land where the party had been held and the 300 acres surrounding it, trying to find Denise or any clue that could lead to her whereabouts. But as massive as the search operation was, the efforts yielded no valuable results. Her parents revealed to the police that Denise had no relatives in the area that she could have been visiting, so there was no reason why she should have driven down there. According to her parents, Denise was her usual cheerful and vibrant self in the weeks leading to her disappearance. In fact, Denise had broken up with her boyfriend, Sean M. McClune, who she had been dating for 3 years. Her mother, Judy, said that her daughter was becoming more social since her breakup. There was nothing indicating she was disturbed or distressed in any way. Another baffling aspect of her disappearance was that Denise was not the type of teenager who liked to run away from home. She had never done so, and, in fact, she always informed her parents of where she was going and who she would be with. She also didn't take any of her belongings with her, and police later found her missing purse at the property where the party had been held the day before she vanished. Police believed there was foul play involved in Denise's disappearance, despite the lack of physical proof to support that theory. A healthy, brilliant young lady with a bright future ahead didn't just up and vanish like that. It didn't make sense. Investigators identified and interviewed everyone in Denise's address book, including her boyfriend, Sean M. McClune. Unfortunately, they still couldn't find any clues about what happened to Denise. So, on April 25, 1986, police offered a $5,000 reward for information leading to Denise's whereabouts. In the years that followed, there were countless theories regarding what happened to Denise, as well as alleged sightings of her throughout the country. On August 19, 1988, Denise's parents received a hoax call from a Norfolk teenager pretending to be Denise. After that, the case went cold for the next couple of decades with no new leads, breakthroughs, or suspects, until 2020, when the case took a surprising turn. In March 2020, authorities announced that they had arrested Denise's ex-boyfriend, Sean M. McClune, and charged him with voluntary manslaughter in Denise's missing case. When authorities questioned him during the initial investigation, Sean claimed Denise was still alive and that he didn't know anything about her disappearance. In fact, they had already broken up when she disappeared. However, he later admitted to killing her in March 1986. Police offered Sean a plea deal where he would be offered immunity in Denise's case and have other unrelated charges brought against him dropped if he could tell them where to find Denise's body. But Sean rejected the deal, claiming he could not provide the location of Denise's body. Sean's trial was scheduled for late 2020, but he passed away in September of that year before the trial commenced. He had been in prison on unrelated charges when he confessed to Denise's murder. It turned out that Sean had gotten diagnosed with a terminal illness, and his lawyer claimed he gave a false confession in hopes of being freed. Unfortunately, Denise's family could not get closure on their daughter's disappearance from the arrest of Sean McClune. A spokesperson for the Fayette County Sheriff's Department revealed that the 3-decades-long investigation into Denise's disappearance is still open and active. So there is hope yet that the truth about Denise's disappearance will come to light. 14-year-old Dean Marie Peters was an 8th grader in 1981 with a solid academic record and a cheerful and happy disposition in life. She was born on September 24, 1966 in California, where her biological father lived. Her parents were separated, and her mother remarried and moved to Grand Rapids, Michigan with her new husband. On February 5, 1981, Deanie was at her brother's wrestling practice at Forest Hills Central Middle School in the 5800 block of Ada Drive, southeast in Grand Rapids, Michigan. At around 5 p.m. that day, she left saying she was going to the restroom and would return shortly. However, she never returned, and she was never seen again. Deanie, affectionately known as Deanie by her friends and family, was around 5 foot 3 inches tall, weighing 110 pounds at the time of her disappearance. She had brown hair and matching brown eyes. On that fateful day, she had been wearing a brown ski jacket, a pink sweater, 27 32-inch Levi blue jeans, white bikini panties, a size 34C Bali bra, a cream-colored scarf with the word ski written on it in dark brown letters, and white knee socks. Deanie was a well-behaved young girl with no history of running away from home. She was excited about the future, aspiring to become a model. Also, she had left behind her personal belongings, including her wallet, purse, makeup, jewelry, clothing, and several $100s at home. So, it did not make sense to think she had just left home. The only reasonable conclusion was that Deanie had been abducted. Once police began investigating, they quickly realized that Deanie had in fact never made it to the restroom, as nobody could place her there at any point in time. There are conflicting accounts of her intentions that day. Some claim she was heading to a friend's house, while others believe she simply wanted to smoke a cigarette. The only settled fact is that several people saw her leaving the gymnasium, but nobody saw her reach the restroom. Initially, the investigators considered Arthur Diaz, the school's custodian, a suspect in Deanie's disappearance. He claimed that he was cleaning a school office on the night Deanie vanished and never saw her, but authorities did not believe his story. At some point, they decided to inspect the school incinerator on the suspicion that someone might have murdered Deanie and buried her body, but they never found anything, and Diaz was eventually removed from the suspect list. 2 days before Deanie went missing, she had a fight with 2 schoolgirls over a boy, with the 2 girls allegedly threatening Deanie to stay away from the boy. 17-year-old Bruce Bunch, a high school junior at the time, knew one of the girls. Bruce claimed to have seen Deanie and drove his car at her to scare her, but accidentally hit her with his car, resulting in her death. He allegedly hid her body in a bush to later bury it, possibly in the Snow Avenue area. Bunch shared different versions of the story with multiple people, including his first and second wives, who often complained about Bunch being aggressive and violent. However, Bunch was never questioned or charged in connection with Deanie's disappearance. He passed away in 2008 from a heart attack. In 2021, investigators circled back to Bruce Bunch, announcing that they believed he was responsible for Deanie's death. However, they could never verify his stories of what happened that night. They also thought that there were still individuals with undisclosed information that could help solve the case. One woman, believed to have crucial information, failed a polygraph test regarding Deanie's disappearance. In July 2021, James Douglas Jim Frisbee, who was 21 at the time of Deanie's disappearance, was charged with perjury in connection with her case. He was suspected of lying or providing false information to police about possible suspects or witnesses in the cold case homicide and willfully impeding other witnesses' cooperation. James had a criminal record dating back to 1978, though he has never been convicted of a felony. 23 years later, Denise's case remains unsolved. Although she was declared legally dead in 1991, it is unlikely that her family members have found any closure or solace in that. Still, authorities continue their efforts to find answers and locate Dean Marie Peters. Logan Bowman was a 5-year-old Caucasian boy from Galax, Virginia. On January 7, 2003, Logan went missing while playing at home. But his mother, Cynthia Lee Davis, did not report his disappearance until over 2 weeks later, on January 23, 2003. This gave police a late start in figuring out how Logan had disappeared and who was responsible for his disappearance. Upon interrogation, Logan's mother could not provide a clear explanation for the delay in reporting him missing. The only helpful information they could obtain was that when he was last seen, Logan was 3 feet 2 inches tall and weighed 30 pounds with blonde hair and blue eyes. Notably, Logan had decayed teeth, a healing fracture in his left arm, and fresh burns on his feet, legs, buttocks, and genitals that suggested that Logan had been suffering serious abuse and neglect at home. Before he disappeared, Logan had suffered severe burns to his legs, feet, groin, and buttocks, but did not receive adequate medical attention for those injuries. Evidence suggested that Cynthia was aware of the abuse her son suffered and probably even inflicted some part of it herself, with the help of her boyfriend, Dennis Danny Schmierhorn, who could only provide conflicting statements about Logan's case. However, what seemed more baffling to authorities was that it appeared Logan's school teachers had observed bruises on his body in December, but withheld this information from authorities until after his disappearance. As for Logan's biological father, the last time he saw Logan was Christmas in 2002. Logan's custody arrangement meant that his father had weakened visitation rights, but Cynthia and her boyfriend prevented Logan's father from seeing him, claiming Logan was ill. It wasn't until Logan's father threatened to contact the police that Cynthia and Danny decided to report Logan missing. In April 2003, Cynthia and Danny were charged with child endangerment, relating to their failure to seek medical care for Logan's burns and their delay in reporting him missing for 2 weeks. In July of the same year, they were charged with felony murder. Meanwhile, Logan's father was not considered a suspect in his son's disappearance. Cynthia pleaded guilty to all charges brought against her and received a 15-year prison sentence, along with 20 years of probation. She also testified against Danny, alleging that he was the reason why Logan hadn't received adequate medical attention. She claimed that around January 7th, Logan was severely scalded in the bathtub, and she wanted to take him to the hospital, but Danny advised her to calm down first. In the process, Cynthia fell asleep, and when she woke up, her son was gone. However, Danny claimed that Cynthia had indeed left with Logan, supposedly for the hospital, but had not returned without him. He added that he believed Cynthia might have sold her son. His defense worked, though, because in May 2004, a judge dismissed the murder charge and one of the child neglect charges against Danny due to a lack of evidence. Prosecutors had relied on Cynthia's testimony, which was inconsistent and self-serving, making it a challenge to convict Danny. Nonetheless, he was convicted of 1 count of child neglect and received a 1-year jail sentence. As time passed, both Cynthia and Danny completed their sentence and were released from jail. But this conclusion didn't bring peace to Logan's family. Unfortunately, despite their efforts, they felt helpless due to the absence of new evidence. Without Logan's body being found, there were limited options available to continue pursuing the case. However, a significant shift was on the horizon. On September 6, 2022, skeletal remains were discovered in a wooded area located in Galax, a city in southwestern Virginia. These remains were found within a trash can. Alongside the body, items such as a sleeping bag, a Winnie the Pooh blanket, and a fragment of cloth were discovered. The police confirmed that these partial remains had been situated there for several decades, signifying the potential revelation of a long-standing unsolved case. Specifically, considering the duration the bones had been present, the case that resurfaced pertained to the disappearance of Logan Bowman. Investigators collaborated with Othram Inc., a forensic genealogy company based in Texas, utilizing DNA analysis to compare the recovered DNA with that of Logan's relatives. In December 2023, after a span of 2 decades since the disappearance, the remains were conclusively identified as belonging to Logan Bowman. Had he been alive, Logan would have turned 25 years old at that time. With the identification of Logan's remains, the case entered a new phase. Despite prior release of both Danny and Cynthia from prison, the newfound evidence might potentially lead to further charges, which could result in extended incarceration for both individuals. Richard Vaughn, the sheriff in Grayson County, affirmed that they are actively considering further charges and exploring their legal options in relation to the case. However, immediate contact with Cynthia and Danny couldn't be established. Despite this, there is strong indication that justice is on the horizon and that additional legal actions may ensue in due course. On September 14, 1934, 35-year-old Reverend Elliott Speer was in his study doing some paperwork when a loud explosion suddenly rang out. Within a few minutes, Reverend Speer was lying in a pool of blood at his wife's feet, deceased. His death would spark a highly sensationalized murder mystery that remains unsolved to this day. Reverend Elliott Speer was born on November 1, 1898, in Englewood, New Jersey. His father, Robert E. Speer, was a prominent preacher and writer, which meant Elliott had a lot of Christian influence while growing up. Elliott was educated at Phillips Academy, Massachusetts, before attending Princeton, New Jersey in 1917. His mother, Emma Dahl Bailey Speer, was also a significant presence in his life. He briefly volunteered for the British Army YMCAs during World War I, during which he sustained a severe injury that forced him to return to the United States. In February 1921, Elliott graduated from Princeton with a degree in theology. He also married Holly, a graduate of Vassar, and the couple moved to Scotland so Elliott could further his education. In 1932, Elliott was installed as the headmaster of Mount Hermon Preparatory School for Boys in Northfield, Massachusetts. As headmaster, Elliott tried to revise some of the school's rules and practices that he found too strict for a prep school. But his plan did not sit well with some of the school's board members, so Elliott made enemies fast. On September 14, 1934, Mount Hermon School was preparing for the resumption of its students the following week. Elliott, his wife Holly, and 3 daughters, and Holly's parents had a normal dinner at Ford Cottage, a large brick home on the school's campus designated for the headmaster. Around 8 p.m., Elliott went to his study on the home's first floor to do some paperwork, as he usually did around that time. Suddenly, Holly, who was in the bedroom directly above the study, heard a loud noise that sounded like an explosion. This was around 8:15 to 8:20 p.m. When she ran downstairs to investigate, she saw her husband staggering out of the study, drenched in blood. Elliott, bleeding from the wounds in his right arm and side, said, "I don't know what happened." Those would be his last words. Holly immediately sent for a doctor while she and her father tried to control Elliott's bleeding. Unfortunately, it was too late when the doctors arrived. Elliott was dead. As police began their investigation, one of the first things they discovered was that from the angle Elliott had been shot, it seemed like he had stood up from his chair and was reaching for something at the top of his bookshelf when the bullet hit him. They also discovered that the murder weapon was a 12-gauge shotgun fired point-blank through the window. 5 pellets of a double-aught buckshot, each about 1/3 inch in diameter, caught Elliott in his right arm and the right side of his chest. As the investigation proceeded, headed by District Attorney Joseph T. Bartlett, ballistics experts from the Massachusetts State Police recovered shell wadding beneath a large maple tree beside the house. The tree had a low-hanging bough that gave the killer a good cover while they fired at Elliott from a sharp angle. Police started their interviews with members of the Speer household, including the staff. One of the maids told police she heard heavy running footsteps on the lawn immediately after the shooting. Another witness recalled seeing a car parked in front of the school's dining hall, which was about 200 yards away from the Speer home, speed away after the attack. D.A. Bartlett believed the perpetrator was someone close to the Speer family and familiar with the school, but there wasn't enough evidence to bring anyone in for questioning, let alone make an arrest. Another strange thing about this case was that the Speers owned a pair of Newfoundland dogs that were both at the residence at the time of the shooting. However, neither of the dogs made any sound to indicate they knew something suspicious was going on. Investigators believe that this likely meant the dogs knew the perpetrator and was familiar with them. However, the most intriguing part of the investigation was investigators' suspicion that Elliott's murder was inspired by the events in a book he owned, The Public School Murder, which tells the story of a headmaster murdered by a rifle through his window. It was also quickly determined that Elliott must have been killed by a disgruntled student, teacher, or religious fanatic who disagreed with Elliott's liberal policies as headmaster. Over the following months, investigators ruled out every suspect they could come up with, except one name: Thomas E. Elder. Thomas, a dean of the school, had a tense relationship with Elliott because, for one, he believed he should have been headmaster instead of Elliott. He also wasn't a fan of Elliott's methods of running the school. On top of that, he was also known for having a quick temper and being capable of holding a grudge. Investigators further discovered that Thomas had the exact type of weapon used to murder Elliott, which he failed to disclose to police. He had also allegedly set up a huge scheme to alibi himself, including adjusting all the clocks in the school to be 15 minutes faster so he could have time to commit the murder. Police also found 2 supposedly forged letters between Elliott and Thomas that looked deliberately forged to imply a strong friendship between both of them, which was not the case. Thomas's alibi was a young student whom he had been entertaining the night Elliott was murdered. However, the student informed police that shortly before the incident, Thomas had excused himself, saying he had something to attend to. It would later be discovered that Elliott had lent his copy of The Public School Murder to Thomas about a week before he was murdered. When all this evidence was presented to Judge Hayes, who presided over the matter, Hayes determined that although the evidence seemed overwhelming, it was merely circumstantial and not enough to bring murder charges against Thomas Elder. As a result, Thomas was not charged with the murder of Reverend Elliott Speer. Subsequently, Thomas retired from the school and moved to New Hampshire, where he opened a poultry farm. 6 years later, He was arrested for threatening a former Mount Hermon school colleague with a shotgun and was acquitted at trial. Meanwhile, the murder of Reverend Elliott Speer remains a mystery, perhaps one of the biggest mysteries of the 20th century.